Hey guys, tonight we drift quietly down the Nile, the morning sun just beginning to brush against the mud brick rooftops of ancient Thebes. You stir awake inside a modest home, the smell of last night's lentils still lingering in the corners. Outside, a donkey brays and papyrus reeds rustle in the breeze. But before you can shuffle to the courtyard for breakfast, your mouth reminds you, yep, ancient Egyptian morning breath is very real. Imagine stale date wine, dried fish, and a touch of sand for texture. Your jaw aches from grinding grain all week, and your breath could probably wither a lotus flower. You, my friend, are about to embark on a day of ancient oral hygiene. You probably won't survive this without at least one cracked molar. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up and stretch, already dreading the first task of the day, tackling your teeth. There's no mirror, no minty mouthwash, no cushy electric toothbrush humming at your bedside. Just a small ceramic dish sitting near the corner, filled with an ominous grayish powder. It's gritty, lumpy, and smells vaguely like burned seashells. This is your toothpaste, or more precisely, tooth powder. Made from crushed pumice, ground limestone, and a dash of salt or dried flowers, if you're lucky. It's the ancient world's answer to plaque. You wet your fingers and pinch some of it into your mouth, grinding it against your teeth with your index finger. The texture is unkind. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians actually understood the mechanics of oral hygiene, or if they were mostly focused on ritual cleanliness. Either way, there's no denying they cared. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical documents, lists multiple dental remedies, some for toothaches, others to preserve a pleasant mouth. Your own family swears by their great-grandmother's recipe, powdered ox hooves and burnt bread crust. You rinse with a gulp of river water scooped from a clay pot, which only helps a little. There's still a persistent taste of sand. Not surprising, every bite of bread you've eaten in the last year likely carried trace amounts of quartz, courtesy of the grinding stones used to process grain. And you've been grinding your teeth in your sleep again. You can feel it. Tiny cracks along the enamel that weren't there last season. You wander to the edge of the home. As you wash your hands with a splash of brackish well water, a rooster stumbles by, pecking at the dirt near your feet. A cat prowls around the courtyard wall. Everyone seems to be waking up, except your teeth, which still feel like they've been rubbed with a brick. But the ritual must continue. Cleanliness in Egypt isn't just a nicety, it's a necessity, spiritual even. The gods expect your body to be purified, especially if you're one of the lucky few who might one day be mummified. No one wants to be embalmed with a mouthful of yesterday's lentil stew. The priests would be appalled. And so you reach for a small wooden stick beside the bowl, your makeshift toothbrush. Not yet chewed into bristles, that part comes later. For now, you chew the tip until it frays, releasing a tangy bitterness. This is the Salvadora persica twig, what later cultures would call the miswak. The ancient Egyptians may not have known it was antibacterial, but they appreciated its power to scrape, scrub, and slightly freshen. The act is repetitive, a little soothing. You swish and chew, scrape and spit, working along each molar as best you can. You're not alone. Across Egypt, from tomb workers to temple guards, Thousands perform the same dance each morning, battling the inevitability of erosion and decay with nothing more than crushed stone and sacred habit. Some say that even the gods brushed their teeth. The myth of Tefnut and Shu, deities of moisture and air, Mento's divine spittle and purification. You wonder if Ra, god of the sun, had a preference for mint or myrrh. Probably myrrh. Everything back then had myrrh in it, even toothpaste. A soft breeze passes through the courtyard, carrying the smells of dung fires and baking barley. You pause your brushing and squint at the horizon. Another long, dusty day ahead. Your teeth still ache, but there's a strange satisfaction in the ritual. Primitive though it may seem, it connects you to the land, the gods, and to all those whose molars have already crumbled to dust beneath the sands. You give your makeshift brush one last chew, then rinse your mouth again with the tiniest splash of wine, too sour to drink, but sharp enough to feel like it's killing something in there. Probably not the right bacteria, but at least it burns. And just like that, you're ready to face the day. Breath pungent but purified, gums tender but determined. You tie a length of linen around your waist and step out into the morning light, your teeth just a little cleaner than they were yesterday. You trudge down the dusty lane, teeth still tingling from the gravelly polish you gave them with that volcanic ash concoction. Now it's time for the second part of your dental routine, or punishment, depending on how you look at it. You duck into a shaded corner near the grain storage bins and squat down with a small jar of yesterday's homemade blend. Your personal tooth powder recipe, featuring crushed rock, burnt eggshells, and the faintest hint of dried iris root. This is where things get crunchy. The mix looks like a cross between sand and ashes, with little flecks of something black that you're pretty sure are not bugs. You scoop up a pinch, press it between your fingertips, and can feel the jagged grit. It's coarser than anything you've put in your mouth since that time you accidentally bit into an uncooked barley husk. But hey, beauty is pain, and dental hygiene? Even more so in 1400 BCE. As you rub the powder along your molars again, this time with the aid of a linen-wrapped stick, you marvel at the ingenuity behind the ingredients. The pumice is imported, expensive, and extremely effective at scraping away plaque. So effective, in fact, that it also scrapes away enamel. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians understood this trade-off, or if they simply believed the more it hurts, the cleaner it must be. Judging by your slightly bleeding gums, you're inclined to think they leaned toward the latter. You spit into a crack in the ground and glance around. A nearby potter is rinsing his mouth with what looks like beer again. That's not part of the dental plan, but you suspect it takes the edge off the blood taste. You make a mental note. The flavor of the powder is predictably terrible. A dry, mineral taste like licking a sandstone wall under the hot sun. But what's fascinating is how consistent it's been across generations. Some formulas even added ox hooves, or, if you had some status, precious myrrh and cinnamon. You, of course, are working with budget ingredients. Your family's crushed rock comes from a neighbor's workshop, the ashes from burnt reeds, and the eggshells. Well, they're technically from ducks, mostly. You wonder if pharaohs had it better. Probably. They had staff for this sort of thing. Servants who applied the powder delicately, in between applications of scented oil and ceremonial eyeliner. You picture some royal hygienist with a golden spatula, gently exfoliating Amenhotep's canines. Meanwhile, your own spatula is a reused spoon carved from sycamore wood and slightly singed from A little boy wanders by with a bundle of straw in his arms. He smiles, showing several missing teeth. Kids these days. You give him a half smile back, lips closed. No point flaunting your own calcium erosion. He'll get there eventually. Just wait until he meets the bread. You pause to inspect a chip in one of your back molars. Sharp. That's new. Probably from yesterday's barley loaf, which might as well have been cut with sandpaper. Bread here isn't fluffy. It's dense, packed with stone-ground flour and sprinkled liberally with grit. You think about that for a moment. You spend the morning scrubbing your teeth with rocks only to eat rocks for lunch. It's a vicious, dusty cycle. A neighbor from the next alley greets you, holding up a stick of licorice root. It's her version of oral hygiene, natural sweetness, antibacterial properties, and a mild laxative effect that, well, isn't really relevant to your teeth but has its uses. She offers you a piece, and you accept it gratefully, chewing it slowly as the bitterness gives way to something surprisingly pleasant. As you chew, your mind drifts to some of the odder ingredients used in tooth powders around the country. Burnt honeycomb, crushed mice bones, even dried donkey dung, which, thankfully, you've never had the misfortune of trying. Yet. Scholars debate whether some of these were medicinal or magical. Did people believe that donkey dung cured halitosis? Or were they just trying to make you gag hard enough to reset your mouth entirely? You finish your root stick and exhale through your nose. A bit fresher, maybe. You're no rose garden, but you could probably converse without knocking someone over. Probably. You pack up your small kit and dust your hands off on your linen wrap. There's something empowering about this simple act of self-maintenance. Even if the materials are crude and the process is borderline medieval, well, pre-medieval, there's intent behind every scrape, every powder, every rinse. And so you rise, mouth feeling sandblasted but spiritually refreshed, and prepare to venture further into your day, toward more rituals, more odd tools, and even stranger cures. Your teeth may be slowly eroding, but your dedication? Impeccable. The sun climbs higher, baking the mud brick walls and heating the sand beneath your sandals. You've made it through the powder and the pumice, but your dental odyssey is far from over. Now comes the fiddly part, flossing. You reach into the small woven basket you carry on your hip and pull out two things, a strip of dried papyrus and a thin stick with a split end. The stick is your chew brush, made from the root of a desert shrub with a name you can't pronounce but tastes like the inside of a medicinal jar. You chew one end until it frays like a tiny mop. The other item, the papyrus floss, is just what it sounds like. A narrow, sun-dried sliver of plant fiber, thin enough to wedge between your teeth, strong enough to yank out anything stuck from yesterday's lentil stew. You sit down in the shade of a sycamore fig and get to work. The flossing isn't elegant. You grunt, you wince. You mutter a short prayer to Seshat, goddess of wisdom, because who else would you call on when extracting a fish bone lodged between your second molars? Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians used papyrus for dental care intentionally or just repurposed leftovers from scribes. Either way, it works. You guide the strip between your teeth, working around the gaps worn in by decades of gritty bread and chewing on dried figs. A priest walks past, on his way to the local temple, his breath already anointed with morning incense. He nods in approval at your routine. Cleanliness was next to godliness, and the gods, apparently, had no patience for halitosis. Some rituals even required purification of the mouth before reciting sacred texts. Imagine mispronouncing an offering prayer because your bicuspid was throbbing. Unforgivable. You switch to the frayed stick now, rotating it slowly in your hand. It's flexible, worn, and faintly bitter. The taste is numbing at first, then peppery, then earthy. It's not pleasant, but it's strangely comforting. You scrape along the base of your teeth with it, gently brushing out any remnants of last night's spiced lentil mash. The chewing stick has stood the test of time. Even in modern parts of the world, descendants of this method persist. Archaeological digs have uncovered bundles of these twig tools in tombs, placed with care next to combs, mirrors, and amulets. Because what use is eternity if you've got spinach in your teeth? Some versions of the sticks were infused with herbs, thyme, mint, or frankincense. Yours? Yours just tastes like desert dust and unresolved ambition. But it's doing the job. Your teeth feel cleaner. Not minty fresh, but less embarrassing. A beetle scuttles by, dragging a piece of barley husk twice its size. You nod in solemn recognition. Life is about hauling uncomfortable burdens. You shift your weight and move on to your front teeth. These are trickier, more exposed, more likely to chip if you're not careful. You recall your uncle who broke his front incisor trying to bite open a fig nut. It took weeks before he could eat properly again. He tried herbal compresses, spell scrolls, even rubbing crushed emeralds on his gum, none of which helped. But he did claim he had very lucky dreams afterward. Placebo effect? Maybe. Or maybe dreams are the body's way of numbing us from dental agony. You pause for a break, massaging your jaw. The sun is nearly overhead now. The world smells like heat and pressed linen. You're halfway through your routine and already dreaming of chilled beer and lotus soup. But there's satisfaction in this ritual. Something grounded. You're maintaining yourself, warding off rot, one twig at a time. The papyrus floss lies discarded at your feet, slightly blood-stained. Normal, you remind yourself. Gums aren't supposed to be delicate when they're sandpapered every morning. You pick up a second strip and go back in for a final pass, digging into a suspicious crevice near your back molar. Something dislodges. You don't ask what it is. You just spit, swish, and move on. You think back to the tomb paintings you've seen. Noble women holding flowers to their noses, their lips painted, their teeth white. That's the ideal. But real life? Real life is a stick between your teeth and the taste of ancient dirt. Still, you do your best. The stick is worn now, softened from chewing. You toss it aside for compost and make a mental note to pick a fresh one near the canal tomorrow. The best ones grow near the reeds, long, supple, and vaguely sweet if you catch them in season. You stand, stretch, and smile, just a little. Your teeth aren't perfect. They're cracked, slightly yellowed, and uneven. But they're clean, and in ancient Egypt, that means something. It means your breath won't offend a god. It means you can whisper spells without fear of interruption. It means, for another day, you're winning the war against decay. You begin walking again, the stick's bitterness lingering on your tongue. Somewhere nearby, someone's baking bread. You smell the grain and brace yourself, because no matter how clean your mouth is now, you know it won't last past lunch. The scent of baking bread coils through the air, warm and deceptively comforting. But you know better. You've been through this before. You've seen what lies beneath that golden crust. You arrive at the household bakery, a pit oven sunken into the floor, glowing faintly from embers still crackling from the pre-dawn bake. A woman with arms dusted in flour offers you a fresh loaf. You nod your thanks and break it in half, steam rising in soft plumes. It's beautiful, but this bread is lying to you. Because what you're about to chew isn't just grain and water, it's a mineral gauntlet, a trap set by the gods of dental despair. The problem, as you know all too well, lies in the flour. The grinding stones used in Egyptian households, called querns, are hand-rubbed with sandstone slabs. Over time, these stones wear down. Bits of grit and powdered quartz end up in the flour, and because no one wants to waste grain, that grit goes straight into the dough. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians recognized the connection between their tooth erosion and their bread. Some claim there were warnings passed down, grandmothers muttering about grain that bites back. Others think it was simply accepted, like sandstorms or sibling rivalry. Unpleasant, inevitable, and always worse when you're hungry. You take a bite. The crust is crisp, the interior dense, chewy, slightly sour from natural fermentation. And then there it is, that subtle crunch. Not from seeds, not from nuts, from stone. You feel it slide between your teeth like sandpaper, dragging itself across the enamel you so carefully cleaned this morning. A quiet sigh escapes your lips. It's always the second bite that hurts. You chew carefully, using your molars, shifting from side to side. Some days you wonder if it's worth it. But food is food, and in ancient Egypt, bread is life. It's not just nourishment, it's payment, offering, and spiritual symbol. Workers were paid in loaves, gods were fed with bread sculptures. The Book of the Dead includes spells to ensure you get your share in the afterlife. You just hope the afterlife version has better milling standards. Across from you, a scribe is having his own breakfast, a bowl of beans and a loaf identical to yours. He tears it slowly, eyes squinting. He's missing a canine. You know this because he laughs with his mouth open, revealing a dark little gap. Probably lost it to the same flour that's now wearing down your incisors. A passing servant offers you a dollop of honey to dip your bread in. Sweet relief. You scoop it generously, letting the sticky gold coat the edges. It helps soften the bite, masks the grit a little. Ancient Egyptians loved honey, not just for flavor, but for medicine, embalming, even dental salves. There's a recipe in the Ebers Papyrus for a toothache balm made from honey and powdered. You finish your loaf slowly, using the tip of your tongue to sweep away the particles wedged into your gum line. You'd floss again if you weren't saving your last strip of the papyrus for tomorrow. Resource management is key. After eating, you rinse your mouth with beer, not the frothy kind you might be picturing, but the flat, sour, half-fermented barley sludge that functions more like a nutritional soup. It's cloudy, slightly gritty, and full of yeast. You swish it with dignity. Beer, ironically, might be one of the kinder drinks to your mouth. It softens the bread, rinses away fragments, and, if you believe your grandmother, calms angry teeth. Historians debate whether this is ancient wisdom or wishful thinking fueled by alcohol. Either way, it doesn't hurt. You set your cup down and stretch your jaw. It's already sore. There's a dull ache under your right molar, a quiet warning like a whisper from an old crack in the enamel. You try not to think about it. If it gets worse, you'll visit the healer. He'll chant a spell about banishing the toothworm and give you a paste made of onions and donkey fat. That'll be a treat. You thank the baker with a quiet nod and wander back toward your courtyard, picking a breadcrumb out of your molars as you go. The day is heating up. You squint at the sun, wondering whether the next step is worth it. But you already know the answer, because once the bread is eaten, the real damage begins. It's time to go see the local healer priest. The one who applies natron like a dentist and recites prayers like an oracle. Your mouth isn't finished with you yet. You rub your temples and sigh. Tooth powder, twig brushes, papyrus floss. And now you're headed for sacred breath ceremonies, all just to survive another day with your dentition intact. The joys of living in a civilization obsessed with beauty, but cursed with sandstone flour. You make your way through the winding alleys toward the temple complex, the sun now hanging overhead like a golden anvil. Heat shimmers across the limestone walls, and even the cats have flattened themselves in the shade. Your destination is the side chamber near the Hall of Offerings, not the main sanctuary, but a small room used by the lower-ranking priest healers, the kind who tend to your body while the others pray for your soul. Inside, it smells of incense, natron, and faintly of onions. You greet the healer priest with a respectful bow. He nods in return, eyes half-lidded, robes already smudged with chalky fingerprints. This is a man who has seen many mouths, and likely regrets every one of them. You sit on a woven mat as he prepares his tools. A jar of natron, Egypt's beloved multi-purpose mineral, sits nearby, flanked by two wooden implements that look more like sculpting tools than anything you'd want in your mouth. He begins by muttering a prayer to Sekhmet, lion-headed goddess of both plague and healing. It's comforting, in a way. You feel like you're about to receive either divine salvation or a mild mauling. Either would be a relief at this point. Historians still argue whether these temple-based healers were more medical or magical in function. The lines between science and spirituality in ancient Egypt are blurred like watercolor on papyrus. One scribe's toothpaste is another priest's sacred balm. The healer asks you to open wide, and you do, suppressing a wince as he dabs the natron along your gum line. It stings, a salty chemical burn, like brushing with chalk and vinegar. You blink back tears and try to focus on the flickering oil lamp behind him. He murmurs as he works. It's part ritual, part reassurance, part theater. The spells aren't shouted, they're whispered, intimate and slow, like bedtime stories for your enamel. One verse calls for the removal of mouth demons. Another promises the sweetness of breath to please the gods. You nod politely, mouth open, eyes watering. The natron paste is thick, grainy, and utterly unappetizing. But the Egyptians loved it. They used it to embalm bodies, dry wounds, preserve fish, and, yes, clean teeth. Its antibacterial properties were strong enough to keep corpses from rotting. One can only hope it has the same effect on your breath. The healer reaches for a second jar, this one filled with a paste that smells strongly of... After all, you can't recite a spell to open the doors of the afterlife if you've got a mouthful of decay and disappointment. He finishes the application and hands you a small bowl of water infused with cinnamon and myrrh. You swish it carefully, letting the warm brew bathe your gums. It's bitter, earthy, and oddly calming. You spit into a cracked clay vessel and feel strangely reborn. The healer steps back and inspects your teeth with a furrowed brow. He utters one final spell, something about banishing hunger spirits from the tongue, and gestures that you're done. You bow again, slightly dizzy from the burning rinse and the sheer effort of not coughing. Before you go, he offers you a small amulet. It's shaped like a tiny crocodile and carved from glazed faience. For protection, he says, against tooth demons. You nod solemnly and tuck it into your belt. Tooth demons or not, your mouth does feel better, cleaner, at least for now. The throbbing has dulled, and your breath no longer smells like a mixture of lentil soup and existential despair. The priest did well. You step back into the sunlight, blinking like a mole. The heat hits you like a sheet of linen fresh from the kiln. But your mouth feels oddly radiant, like it's been polished from the inside out. You head toward the river, the Nile glinting ahead, ready to rinse one last time, not out of necessity, but tradition. Water from the Nile is sacred, life-giving. Even if it's muddy, even if you might swallow a bug, it's symbolic. You cup your hands, dip them in, and take a shallow rinse. Cool, slightly gritty, and wholly Egyptian. You spit into the reeds where a frog watches silently. No judgment, just nature doing its thing. As you walk back toward your courtyard, you roll your jaw and test your teeth. No sharp pains, no bloody taste. You exhale through your nose and catch the faintest trace of mint and natron. It won't last, but for now, it's enough. By now, the day is simmering. The sun clings to your skin like a wet linen sheet, and everything smells a little stronger. Sweat, spice, and most notably, breath. Not just yours, everyone's. You pass a group of laborers lounging under a palm awning, laughing and gnawing on dried dates, and the combined aroma could knock a vulture out of the sky. It's no surprise the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with the state of their breath, not just because of social grace, but because foul breath was seen as a spiritual affliction, a sign of imbalance, impurity, even divine disfavor. If your mouth stank, it meant something was wrong with you. Not just your teeth. You. You pull out a small leather pouch tucked into your sash. Inside are your best defense tools: dried mint leaves, a few slivers of cinnamon bark, and a tiny resin ball made of myrrh and frankincense, your version of a breath mint. You pop it into your mouth, and it's immediately bitter. Your salivary glands rebel, your cheeks pucker, and for a moment you wonder if this is how crocodiles feel when they accidentally bite into a lemon. Still, it works. The bitterness spreads, then softens, leaving behind a smoky sweetness that coats your tongue and masks whatever oniony sins remain from breakfast. The ancient Egyptians didn't invent chewing gum, but they came close. They chewed on aromatic tree resins, crushed herbs into pastes, and even brewed breath-freshening mouthwashes using ingredients like caraway, fennel, and juniper. Historians still argue whether these mouthwashes were meant more for ritual purification than oral health, but there's no doubt. They made people smell less like fermented barley. You pass a man selling bundles of herbs from a small reed mat. He nods as you approach, holding up a fragrant handful. "Mint from the Delta," he says, "strong enough to cleanse your sins." You buy a sprig and chew thoughtfully as you walk on. It's a common sight. People of every class tucking herbs behind their ears, chewing on celery seed or carob pods, or carrying little sachets of dried petals to suck on during conversations. It's part fashion, part defense mechanism. You remember a story about a high priest who offended the goddess Hathor during a festival, simply because his breath was like the south wind through a fish market. No one's quite sure if that's metaphor or documentation, but you don't intend to find out firsthand. As you walk past the weaving quarter, you smell another familiar odor: garlic. It's everywhere, on fingers, in stew pots, even wafting from a child gnawing happily on a clove like candy. Garlic was a staple food and medicine, but it did a number on the breath. You pop another mint leaf, just in case. You arrive at a friend's home, where a midday chat over beer and lentils awaits. You sit in the shade of a fig tree and exchange gossip. His teeth are stained with date juice and a bit of green from lunch. He offers you a cup of warm beer, which you accept out of politeness. You take small sips, careful not to let it linger in the gums too long. There's a moment where he laughs and coughs, and suddenly a small something flies from between his teeth and lands on your forearm. It looks like a lentil skin. You stare at it in horror. He shrugs, offers a reed napkin, and says, "At least I didn't lose another tooth." Fair. You excuse yourself gently, pretending to tend to the garden. In truth, you want to rinse again, not with water this time, but with one of your backup brews, a homemade rinse of vinegar, honey, and dried clove. It's acidic, but it cuts through garlic like a sickle through wheat. You swish, grimace, and spit behind a bush. A goat looks at you disapprovingly. Even animals have dental opinions these days. Later, as the sun begins its slow descent, you pull out a final resin ball. This one's mixed with dried rose petals and ash from burned myrtle. It tastes like regret and hope, but once the bitterness fades, your mouth feels calm again, sweet even. You smile slightly, and the wind carries a breeze through the fig leaves. You've chewed, swished, spat, and swished again. Your gums have had more action today than a brickmaker's mallet. But your breath? Manageable. Your spirit? Pure enough to face a god or, at the very least, a mother-in-law. You stretch your jaw and lean back against the tree. The Nile rustles in the distance. You inhale slowly, catching a whiff of mint and cinnamon, still clinging to the back of your tongue. You might not have perfect teeth, but your breath no longer smells like ancient disappointment. And in a world where crocodile dung creams are just around the corner, that's a win. You're halfway through the day, and despite all your scraping, swishing, and chewing, you can't shake the thought of what goes on in the royal court. Because if your own mouth feels like it's been cleaned with sand and vinegar, what must the teeth of the pharaoh himself be like? As you wander through the colonnaded halls of the marketplace, you overhear a stonecutter murmuring to a merchant about the gold-wired teeth of Seti's cousin. It's probably exaggerated, like most stories that pass from vendor to vendor, but still it gets you thinking. How far did the wealthy go to save their smiles? You imagine the court dentists, if such a title even existed, poking around inside the mouths of nobles with ivory picks and obsidian blades. The rich, after all, had access to imported oils, exotic resins, and finer flour that was allegedly free of quartz grit. But even then, they weren't immune to decay. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptian elite truly received better dental care or whether they just suffered more quietly, hidden behind scented veils and precious metal accessories. Some mummies show signs of rudimentary dental work, drilled teeth, linen-stuffed cavities, and in rare cases, gold wire used to fasten loose teeth together. You don't know what's more painful, the image of ancient oral surgery or the idea of someone trying it with no anesthesia. You recall the story of a high-born woman buried with 2 artificial teeth. They weren't even anchored, just wedged in with linen like tiny dental imposters. Another nobleman's mummy was found with a jaw wired shut, possibly to keep his mouth looking intact for the afterlife. Functionality? Optional. Aesthetic? Mandatory. As you chew a piece of dried fig, a seed lodges under your gums. You wince and think of the queen whose tomb revealed perfectly arranged but heavily worn teeth. There's a kind of poetic justice to that, decades of royal feasts taking their toll. It's not all gold and opulence, though. Even pharaohs weren't spared from the grind of Egyptian bread. One theory claims that Ramses II had such poor dental health in old age that he suffered from massive abscesses. In fact, when his mummy was studied, his teeth were so worn down, some historians suggested he may have lived in constant pain. You imagine Ramses, conqueror of empires, wincing at breakfast because of a cracked molar. You feel a strange sense of camaraderie. Royal or not, A bad tooth is a great equalizer. You pass by a sculptor's workshop where a half-finished statue of a priest grins with perfect limestone teeth. You chuckle. Must be nice, you mutter under your breath. The sculptor gives you a puzzled look. You wave and keep walking. Your path takes you through the section of town where artisans make cosmetic items. Kohl for eyes, perfumed oils, and yes, even dental concoctions for the wealthy. There's a woman pressing myrrh into clay molds to dry into little breath-freshening tablets. You ask her about royal preferences. She tells you in a hushed tone that one of the palace's concubines once requested a rinse made from boiled lotus petals and powdered pearls. Did it work? You ask. She shrugs. She married a scribe, so probably not. You thank her and pocket a sample of her herbal chews. Small greenish cubes that smell of coriander and something you can't quite name. You pop one into your mouth and immediately regret it. Tastes like goat hair soaked in vinegar. But at least your breath now smells aggressively herbal. As you move back toward the riverfront, you think again of those wired teeth. The effort, the ingenuity, the discomfort. Gold may gleam, but you know what it doesn't do? Flex. Those wires didn't cushion. They dug in. If anything, they were probably more painful than the problem they were meant to fix. You pause at a small shrine dedicated to Taweret, the protective goddess of childbirth, and oddly enough, sometimes invoked for dental protection. There's an offering bowl with wilted flowers and a tiny carved hippo tusk. You whisper a thanks anyway. Every bit helps. As the sun starts its slow descent, you reflect on your own teeth. They may not be gilded, but they're yours. Crooked, sand-blasted, and squeaky from natron, but functioning. And in this land of gods, grains, and grinding stones, that's enough to count as a minor miracle. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders, the first hint of evening breeze slipping in, and head homeward. Your teeth ache faintly, but so does everyone else's, even the ones with gold in their gums. As the golden sun lowers, your gums begin to throb again. Not sharply, but in that slow, insistent way. A pulsing reminder that while you scrubbed, flossed, and swished like a champ, there's still something festering beneath the surface. Probably the same molar that gave you trouble last winter. Or maybe a new one. You don't keep track anymore. Too many contenders. You've heard whispers that the cause might be worms. Yes, worms. Not the garden variety wriggling through the Nile mud, but invisible ones. Tiny, insidious creatures that burrow into your teeth, devouring them from the inside out. You were skeptical at first, until you spoke to a man from Memphis who claimed to have heard one wriggling. That was enough to unsettle you for a week. The toothworm theory was widespread in the ancient world, and Egypt was no exception. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly believed in a literal worm, or if the idea was symbolic, a metaphor for unseen decay. But the result was the same: suffering, superstition, and spells. Lots of spells. You make your way to a neighborhood healer, one known more for magic than medicine. Her courtyard is filled with hanging amulets, dried herbs, and half-scorched scrolls. She wears a necklace of turquoise beads and speaks in a sing-song tone that makes everything sound either incredibly wise or slightly sarcastic. You explain the pain, and she tuts knowingly. A worm, definitely, she says, tapping your cheek with a reed wand. A hungry one. She offers you a seat on a reed mat and begins her ritual. First, a paste. Crushed onions, honey, cumin, and, most questionably, boiled donkey marrow. You try not to flinch as she smears it along your jawline with a feather. It's warm. Too warm. You tell yourself it's working. She lights incense and begins chanting softly in Middle Egyptian, her voice a rhythmic hum as she circles you 3 times. She sprinkles natron over your head and ties a small charm around your wrist, a shard of glazed faience shaped like a scarab. To trap the worm, she says. It's hard not to laugh, but you don't, because a part of you, deep, aching, and irrational, wants it to be true, wants the worm to be real so it can be blamed, banished, and finally gone. You close your eyes as she continues her chant, describing how the worm came from the underworld, slipped through the cracks of bad dreams, and made a home in your tooth like a tenant refusing to pay rent. Her spell calls on Thoth, god of wisdom, to evict the worm and replace it with silence. When it's over, she hands you a small clay pot filled with a thick black salve. Apply before sleep, she says, and place this under your tongue. She gives you a seed, dried, gnarled, and bitter-smelling. You don't ask questions. Walking home, your mouth still tastes faintly of onion and something vaguely metallic. Your jaw throbs less, though that might just be the placebo, or the spell, depending on your worldview. Along the way, you pass other hopefuls waiting outside her gate. One holds a bundle of garlic, another a carved wooden tooth. All seeking relief, all hoping their pain is the work of a mischievous, nibbling spirit. You smile a little, lips closed. There's something comforting in the idea of a toothworm. It makes the pain tangible, defeatable. It means your suffering isn't senseless, it's a pest problem. You reach your home as the sky begins to blush purple. The pain in your molar has faded to a whisper, not gone, but manageable. You light a small oil lamp and sit by it, examining the salve. It glistens darkly in the flickering light. You dip your finger and gently press it against your gums. It stings, then numbs. You place the bitter seed under your tongue. It tastes like boiled sandalwood and regret. You breathe slowly, letting the scent of natron and old herbs fill your nose. Outside, the wind rustles the papyrus reeds. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, a priest is performing the opening of the mouth ceremony, not for a patient like you, but for a mummy, ensuring their spirit can speak in the afterlife. You wonder if mummies ever worry about worms? Probably not. Their mouths are packed with linen and magic. No room for rot. No room for regret. You lean back, tongue pressed against that strange seed, and try to believe. In the salve, in the spell, in the scarab charm now tied around your wrist. If the worm exists, you've given it plenty to chew on tonight. And maybe, just maybe, it will leave. As night begins to fall over the Nile and the palm fronds sway like whispering hands, you sit quietly by the water, watching the day's last rays shimmer across its surface. The ache in your jaw has eased. Maybe the worm is sleeping, or maybe it's listening. You think about death a lot in Egypt, not in a morbid way, but in that quiet, practical way all Egyptians do. Death is not the end. It's a different kind of journey, a continuation, a necessary bureaucracy, and your teeth, oddly enough, have a role to play. You've been taught that every part of your body must be prepared for the afterlife: skin, bones, breath, and yes, even your molars. Because one day, your heart will be weighed by Anubis, your deeds judged against the feather of Maat, and if you're lucky, if you pass, you'll speak the sacred words and walk into eternity. But what if you can't speak? What if your breath stinks so badly that even the gods recoil? You smile faintly at the thought, Osiris pinching his nose as he reviews your life's sins. Unforgivable, tripping over a temple cat, stealing your cousin's dried fish, and bad breath, unworthy. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians believed a decaying mouth could truly affect your afterlife standing, but the rituals say enough. Mouths mattered. There was even a specific ceremony, the opening of the mouth, performed on the dead. Priests would touch special tools to a mummy's lips, chanting spells to restore their ability to breathe, speak, eat, and drink in the next world. Sometimes the tools resembled chisels, sometimes, oddly, the leg of a calf. You're not sure why that part exactly. The logic of divine dentistry escapes you. But the point was always the same. You enter the afterlife whole, functioning, and respectable. You don't want to wander eternity with a locked jaw and the breath of a compost pit. You reach into your pouch and pull out a tiny strip of linen, rubbing it along your gums one last time. A makeshift nighttime cleaning. No more powders, no more chews, just quiet maintenance, a farewell to the day's damage. Nearby, a fisherman ties up his boat, whistling a low tune. He has no teeth. You nod at him respectfully. He grins, gums only, and waves. Perhaps he's already preparing for the afterlife, or perhaps he's just free from toothworms. You think of all the burials you've seen in your time. Cousins, neighbors, even your grandmother. All lovingly wrapped, faces painted, mouths sealed with care, some with charms inside, tiny statues, sacred beetles, seeds. One relative was buried with a small ivory brush beside her. For cleaning, they said. You wonder if teeth hurt in the afterlife. Probably not. That's part of the reward, isn't it? Eternal comfort. No worms, no grit. Just heavenly bread that doesn't crack enamel. And every soul gets the full set of teeth they never had in life. You imagine a line of spirits waiting at the gates of eternity, all of them smiling, perfectly. No gaps, no gold wires, just radiant, painless smiles. You sit up and sigh. The wind has shifted, carrying cool air in from the water. Your mouth feels clean, not minty, not fresh like morning, but complete. Like you've done your part for the day. Like your soul, through the discipline of repeated scraping and rinsing and weird oniony pastes, is somehow a little lighter. A small amulet rests against your chest, still warm from your skin. The scarab charm, the one meant to trap the worm. You press it between your fingers and close your eyes. You're not afraid of death. Not really. You've done the rituals. You've remembered the names of the gods. You've even memorized a few spells, just in case the ferryman asks for something fancy. But still, it's comforting to know that should you arrive at the threshold of eternity, your mouth will be ready. Not perfect, but presentable. You lie back down and feel the mat cradle your spine. A night bird sings somewhere near the reeds. Insects hum low, rhythmic chords. And the Nile continues its eternal sigh. Whatever tomorrow brings, grit, decay, or the whisper of the worm, you'll meet it with clean teeth and a quiet heart. Morning returns, again, and with it comes the gentle ache of routine. You stretch beneath the mosquito netting, the linen slightly damp from the night's humidity, and sit up slowly. Your jaw feels, well, not great. Something sharp jabs when you clench. You poke at it with your tongue. Definitely a chip. Maybe more than one. You shouldn't be surprised. You've seen what age does to teeth here. You've seen the mummies. You shuffle toward the small shrine in the corner of your home, light a pinch of incense, and begin preparing for the day. But your mind drifts to those silent, preserved faces tucked away in tombs, how the dead still carry the stories of what they chewed, how they suffered. Later that day, you follow a funerary worker to a nearby tomb. He's no embalmer, not the grand kind who prepares royals, but he's allowed to clean and inspect older remains in forgotten chambers. You're just observing, you tell yourself. Curiosity. Educational. He opens a stone door carved with faded prayers, and inside the air shifts instantly, cool, dry, ancient. Dust dances in the slant of your oil lamp. Linen-wrapped shapes lie quietly in niches, surrounded by jars, amulets, and the stillness that only centuries can create. You approach one of the bodies, the wrappings gently pulled back around the face. The skin is sunken, leather-like, yet remarkably intact. But your attention is on the mouth. It's open slightly. Teeth, what's left of them, poke out from the blackened gums like worn tiles on a crumbling temple floor. Yellowed, broken, some reduced to jagged stubs. A few are missing entirely, but most are still there, and more than a few show signs of serious wear. Smooth as river stones, flat as coins. Historians still argue whether these tooth patterns came solely from food grit, or if other factors like sandstorms, accidental chewing of small rocks, or ancient dental cleaning itself played equal parts. You figure it was all of the above. The funerary worker points out something odd. Between two molars, a tiny roll of linen remains lodged. It's blackened with age, but still visible. Possibly a primitive filling, or a post-mortem stuffing to preserve the jaw shape, or just a desperate attempt to hide damage from the gods. You peer closer and notice something even more peculiar. What looks like a pinprick hole in one molar, not natural, drilled. You exchange glances with the worker. Temple priest, he guesses, maybe even a noble. It seems even the privileged had dental work done. You imagine the procedure, no anesthesia, a small copper tool heated or carved to bore into the pulp. The pain must have been unbearable, but also, maybe, a relief, if it let the rot drain. One mummy nearby has lost nearly every tooth. Only two remain, both front incisors, chipped like worn beads. Someone tucked a small ivory comb under her chin. For vanity, you walk down the row, seeing mouth after mouth, some frozen open, others clenched shut, jaws fused by time. And in each, the story is the same. Ground grain, sand-filled bread, fruit seeds, toothaches endured in silence, rituals performed in hope, remedies that may or may not have worked. And you realize, these people brushed too. They chewed twigs, smeared pastes, spat out grit, just like you do, every day. Their mouths were cleaned for burial, not only as a sign of purity, but because in the afterlife, speaking was essential. You kneel beside a child's mummy, no older than 10 at the time of death. A few tiny teeth remain in the jaw, sharp, delicate, untouched by decades of bread. You feel a pang in your chest. Maybe they were spared the worst of it. Or maybe they never lived long enough to suffer it. You step back, quiet, respectful. You're not just seeing bones. You're seeing oral history, literally. The mouths of the past, still whispering their truths, even after death. Outside, the sun hits you like a slap of linen soaked in vinegar. You shield your eyes and sit under the shade of a low tamarisk tree, thinking. No matter what remedies you try, what potions you drink, what flossing technique you adopt, your teeth are slowly becoming like theirs. Worn, chipped, witnesses to a life built around food that fights back. But maybe that's not so grim. Maybe it's a badge of time. Maybe those flattened molars are a symbol of meals shared, work done, grain ground, and moments endured. You sip water and press your tongue gently against your back tooth, still there, for now. You brush a bit of dust from your lips and say a silent thanks to the quiet mouths you left behind in the tomb. They remind you what's coming, but also what matters. You have today. The next morning begins with a peculiar crunch, not from your tooth powder, but from breakfast. Specifically from a barley loaf that feels like biting into a well-sculpted brick. You really should have known better. You're at the local bakery, a low-ceilinged structure that smells of yeast, smoke, and very tired bones. The bakers are already at work, their arms dusted with flour, hands moving through dough like river water over stone. Huge circular querns grind grain in the corner. One woman rubs the top stone back and forth over a pile of barley with methodical pressure. The sound it makes? A gritty whisper, like a broom dragging over gravel. You've watched the process dozens of times. They start with whole grains, barley, emmer wheat, and grind them into what generously qualifies as flour. But the stones aren't perfectly smooth, not anymore. With each batch, they shed tiny fragments of quartz, granite, or sandstone, which end up in the dough. Invisible teeth breakers disguised as nutrition. Historians still argue whether this grit was accepted as a normal part of bread, or whether only the lower classes got the crunchy loaves, while the elite demanded finer flour. Some say even royal bread had its fair share of sediment. If so, pharaohs must have had jaws like crocodiles. You bite cautiously, trying to navigate the minefield of molars. Too late. You hit something. A sharp jolt sings through your jaw, right into the nerve behind your eye. You pause mid-chew and stare at the loaf like it betrayed you, which it did. You've heard horror stories. A friend of a friend cracked a tooth so badly he couldn't eat solids for a month. Another neighbor claims she swallowed a piece of millstone and had dreams about being buried under rubble for weeks. Still, bread is life, literally. The Egyptian word for food, senet, was often synonymous with bread. It was payment, sustenance, spiritual offering. The gods were fed loaves during rituals. The dead received bread figurines in their tombs to nourish the soul. You can't not eat it. But you can curse it softly as you gnaw your way through a slice so dense it could be used as architectural support. A baker notices your wincing and chuckles. "New batch," she says, gesturing to the still warm pile beside the oven. "Fewer stones, probably." You raise an eyebrow but grab a second loaf anyway. It's slightly softer, but still feels like it's hiding something. A tiny betrayal baked into every bite. There were attempts, of course, to soften the impact. Some families mixed grain with legumes or lentils to make the dough smoother. Others soaked it in beer before eating. You've even seen... Across from you, a young boy is helping his mother knead dough. His front teeth are already crooked. Too much sugarcane chewing, probably. He smiles at you, gap-toothed and carefree. You smile back, lips tight over your own fractured collection. You've often wondered if anyone in Egypt had a full set of healthy teeth past the age of 25. Based on the mummies you've seen and the people you know, probably not. But the bread isn't going anywhere. It's still here, still sacred, still necessary. Even the Book of the Dead includes spells to ensure that a person receives loaves of white bread in the afterlife. No one wants to arrive in eternity and be handed nothing but stale crusts and tooth pain. You finish your portion and rinse your mouth with beer. The slightly fizzy bitterness helps wash out the flour paste now coating your gums. You poke at something between your teeth with a sharpened twig. It's not elegant, but it works. The bakers sing softly as they work, something rhythmic, in time with their grinding stones. You listen, chewing the last bite of your loaf like someone preparing for war. This bread may be hard, but you're harder. Your jaw may ache, your molars may protest, and your dentist, if such a person even exists, may scream internally. But you'll keep eating. You have no choice. Bread is life, even if it's trying to kill you. After the rock masquerading as breakfast, Your teeth are officially on strike. You walk with your mouth slightly open, not because you're trying to look thoughtful, but because every bite you took earlier is now echoing in your jaw like tiny thunderclaps. You need relief. Your first stop is the beer house, tucked into the corner of a shaded courtyard where fermented pots sit bubbling quietly like overworked cauldrons. The woman in charge gives you a knowing look as you enter, already pouring a cup of the thick, cloudy barley beer. It's more porridge than Pilsner, and it smells faintly of yeast, grass, and desperation. You drink slowly, letting it roll across your gums. It's not cold. It's never cold. But it's soothing in a strange way. The soft bitterness and fizz dull the edges of your mouth pain. Ancient Egyptians didn't just drink beer for fun. It was food. It was medicine. It was, depending on the batch, surprisingly antiseptic. Historians still argue how clean this beer really was. Some say the fermentation process killed off dangerous bacteria. Others suspect it may have introduced a few new ones. But when your mouth feels like it's been in a fistfight with a millstone, you'll take your chances. You sit on a reed mat by the wall, swishing gently, savoring the moment. A friend slides in beside you and offers a pinch of salt. Ah, right. The second half of your impromptu treatment, brine rinse. You pour a little of the salted water into a small clay bowl and take a tentative sip. It's sharp, stings a bit. The salt water cuts through the beer residue and reaches into the tiny crevices of your gums, stirring up trouble. But also, you hope, healing. Brine rinses were common practice. Salt is cleansing. It kills some bacteria, soothes inflammation, and makes you feel like you're doing something, even if it tastes like the Nile tried to pickle itself. You take another swig of beer. The combination of warm salt water and sour barley sludge isn't ideal, but the sensation is oddly comforting, like you're giving your mouth a spa day, Egyptian style. Across the courtyard, an old man leans over a jug and spits loudly. "Barley and salt," he cackles, "the god's own cure." His remaining teeth agree with him, apparently. There are only 3 of them, and they all seem to lean east. You thank the beer lady and step back into the daylight, mouth tingling from salt, yeast, and residual bitterness. You feel marginally better, less like your teeth are crumbling and more like they're simmering. Still, the throbbing hasn't left entirely. It lingers beneath your back molars like a lazy crocodile, waiting. So, you do what all ancient Egyptians do when nothing else helps. You chew each slowly, hoping the ancient gods are watching. Garlic was known for its medicinal properties, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and capable of making your breath absolutely unapproachable. You mash it between your molars and feel the burn rise straight into your sinuses. You might be killing bacteria. You might also be accidentally fumigating your own skull. Still, it helps. The basil numbs a bit. The coriander brings an oddly sweet sharpness. You feel like your mouth is now hosting a very intense salad, but you don't care. The aching is finally backing down. Historians debate whether these plant-based remedies were really effective or just ritual comfort. Most likely, both. Egyptians didn't separate healing from religion. From scent to spell, everything had layers. The bitterness meant it must be working. The burn meant it must be purifying. The burping meant you might have eaten too much garlic. You sit beneath a fig tree and rest your head against the trunk. Your jaw is sore, but not pulsing. Your gums are slightly tender, but not raw. And for the first time today, you don't feel the urge to curse bread aloud. It's a small victory. Nearby, a boy sells packets of powdered herbs wrapped in linen squares. You buy one. Something for inflammation, he says. Made from ground lotus root, dried mint and crushed shell. You pocket it, just in case the next loaf turns against you again. As the sun slants into late afternoon, you walk home slowly, chewing thoughtfully on the last bit of basil. Your mouth tastes like a vegetable garden, your lips slightly salty, and your breath complicated. But you made it. No priest, no blood, just beer, brine, and bitter leaves. A humble formula. But today, it worked. You wake the next morning to a strange sensation. Relative peace. No new chips. No nerve-jolting pangs. Just that familiar, dull ache. Like your mouth is gently reminding you who's boss. You stretch, sit up, and think, maybe today I won't need to chant to Taweret or chew half a bush. And yet, as you rinse your mouth with stale water from a reed jar, your thoughts drift to the one thing that still puzzles you. Who exactly was an ancient Egyptian dentist? You've heard rumors, of course. Some claim there were true dental specialists, trained in temples or medical schools, experts in mouth maladies. Others insist dental care was handled by embalmers, or even enterprising barbers with too much time and access to sharp things. Historians still argue whether ancient Egypt had what we'd now recognize as dentists, or whether oral care was folded into broader categories of priestly medicine, magic, or sheer improvisation. What is certain, someone, somewhere, was poking around in mouths with tools, and sometimes leaving them worse than they found them. You head toward the scribe's quarter, where a friend of yours has a fascination with old medical scrolls. His collection includes a partial copy of the Edwin Smith papyrus, with diagrams of the human skull and mysterious references to tooth pain that moves like wind. He shows you a section describing how to treat an eating worm in the gum using mashed sycamore fig, beer froth, and incantations directed at Horus. It's medicine, yes, but it's also theater. You ask him if he thinks there were professionals just for teeth. He shrugs and says, there was a man once called the Chief of Tooth Setters, but maybe that just meant he had a firm grip. Later, you pass by a stonecutter's stall where someone is chiseling tiny tools. You recognize the shapes, pointed probes, spatula-like scrapers, things that would look suspiciously familiar to a modern hygienist. You ask what they're for. The craftsman replies, temple work, and sometimes for the mouths of the dead. Ah, dual-purpose tools, sacred and surgical. You remember stories of embalmers who worked on teeth during mummification, not to heal, but to present. Mouths were sometimes filled with linen, plugs, even carved wooden teeth to maintain the illusion of wholeness. Function didn't matter in death. Aesthetics did. But in life, that's where it gets interesting. You've heard of healers who specialized in pain relief, mostly through poultices, salves, or frankly terrifying methods involving hot needles. One tale from the South speaks of a man who drilled a hole in the aching tooth and sang into it. More often, though, care was left to the household. You've seen mothers flossing their children's teeth with palm fiber. You've heard grandmothers mutter ancient chants as they ground mint and myrrh into powder. In this land, medicine lives at the intersection of home and temple, ritual and guesswork. There's a boy in the marketplace today selling fake teeth made of shell. For ceremony, he explains, or pranks. He gives you a wide grin full of jagged limestone and asks if you want one for after you lose that molar. You politely decline and toss him a date. By mid-morning, you find yourself talking to a retired embalmer, a man whose hands always smell faintly of cedar and natron. He claims he once stuffed a nobleman's jaw with crushed turquoise and linen soaked in wine to preserve the smile. When you ask if the man had any real teeth left, he laughs. Not for years, but he looked wise. You begin to realize that dental care here is less of a profession and more of a community project. Everyone contributes. The priests with their purification spells, the healers with their bitter pastes, the embalmers with their cosmetic miracles. And in between, people like you, doing what they can, one chewed stick at a time. You sit beneath a canopy of woven palm leaves, thinking. Maybe there were no dentists as we think of them, but there were caretakers, improvisers, survivors, people willing to poke into aching mouths armed only with garlic, hope, and a twig sharpened at one end. You press your tongue to your sore molar again. Still there, still hanging on. Maybe tomorrow it will break. Maybe not. But today, you're grateful for the care you've pieced together. The salty rinses, the whispered spells, the scratchy reeds, and the woman who believes a scarab charm can trap pain. Dentistry in Egypt isn't a clinic. It's a culture. By now, you've tried everything sensible, and some things that very much weren't. You've rinsed with beer. You've chewed on basil. You've considered sacrificing a fig to the gods of enamel. But your tooth still throbs like a drumbeat. So today, with more curiosity than hope, you decide to explore what the truly desperate do. The bizarre, the grotesque, the absolutely should not work category of ancient dental cures. You start with crocodile dung. Not metaphorically, literally. The apothecary down by the canal has a collection of animal-based remedies that would make a lion gag. Dried bat wings for insomnia, ox bile for hangovers, and yes, small dried patties of what she swears is genuine Nile crocodile dung, sun-dried and pressed for purity. She offers it with a straight face, along with a paste made from crushed garlic, natron, and goose fat. Apply to the jaw, she says. Let the smell scare the pain away. You blink, then blink again. Historians still argue whether Egyptians genuinely believed these remedies had pharmacological value, or whether they were simply doubling down on the shock and awe school of healing. Either way, you're in no position to judge. You take the dung. Back home, you smear a tiny amount, very tiny, on your cheek. The smell is aggressive. A heady blend of scorched hay, vinegar, and something that should never be near a face. You immediately regret every decision leading up to this moment. But weirdly, your jaw does feel numb, possibly from the shame. You follow it with another bizarre recipe from your neighbor's grandmother. A mixture of ground onion skins, crushed date pits, and powdered gypsum, warmed into a paste and stuffed into a linen pouch to rest on your lower jaw. She calls it the night pillow. You call it a mouth-scented brick. And then there's lizard grease. You don't want to ask how it's made. You just know it's thick, greenish, and oily, and meant to be rubbed gently along the gums. You do it anyway, out of either faith or exhaustion. The burn comes quickly, tingling, bitter, not unlike the feeling of regret seasoned with chili. You wait. You pace. You breathe through your mouth. the grease numbs, but your self-respect takes a temporary leave of absence. Next up, onion compresses, chopped raw onion wrapped in papyrus and tied under your jaw with linen. It's pungent. It's ridiculous. It's what your aunt swears cured her cousin's abscess back in year 4 of the current pharaoh's reign. You apply it and sit quietly by your window. People walk past. No one says anything. One friend tells you she once chewed a paste made of moldy bread and honey. Penicillin, she claims, beaming. You're not sure what that word means, but she hasn't complained about her teeth in months. You visit a traveling healer who offers you a breath spray made from lotus oil and what smells suspiciously like fermented radish. He calls it Kiss of Isis. You take one sniff and decide Isis is playing tricks today. The final indignity? A paste of powdered cow teeth mixed with beer foam. For tooth strength, the man says. Drink it, if you dare. You do not dare. Instead, you try something gentler. Fig sap mixed with crushed carob seed. It tastes like bitter caramel and stains your tongue brown, but the ache finally begins to dull. You sit beneath your fig tree, tongue tingling, and reflect. You've smeared animal waste on your face. You've nibbled mold. You've prayed to a dozen gods and whispered to a scarab. And somehow, you're still here. Historians often overlook the sheer volume of weird in ancient medicine. But for those who lived it, like you, it wasn't weird. It was just trying to get through the day without screaming into a clay jar. You press your tongue against your tooth again. Less pain. Still there, but quieter. You smile faintly. You've outlasted it, or confused it into submission. The sun is setting. Your face smells like onion and mystery. And for the first time in days, you don't feel like your jaw is trying to rebel. You lie back and sigh. Whatever tomorrow brings, whether it's elegance or excrement, you've survived the worst. You can even breathe through your nose again. Almost. Dusk descends like honey, thick and golden, softening the world in layers of shadow. You're sitting by the water again, your jaw finally calm, your mouth tired but untroubled. The worst is behind you. You survived the tooth powders, the twig brushes, the onion compresses, the prayers, the pastes, the powders, the panic. You have emerged, a little worn, a little wiser, and slightly more fragrant than you'd like. You reach for your final brew of the day. It's not fancy, just warm water steeped with dried mint, a bit of clove, and a few rose petals dropped in for color. The kind of rinse used not for cleaning, but for closing the day. You sip it slowly, letting the floral notes melt into your gums. It tastes like the kind of sleep you haven't had in a week. You tilt your head back and let the fading light bathe your face. Overhead, stars begin to appear one by one, timid and pale. There's no rush anymore. No tools to use, no spells to chant, no crocodile dung to consider, just you and your breath, and the quiet hum of the Nile behind it all. You think again of the great halls of Osiris, of the weighing of the heart, and the gentle truth that your teeth, cracked and sanded as they are, have carried you this far. They've ground the bread of 1,000 mornings. They've smiled through jokes, bitten through dates, survived famine, festival, and all the grit in between. You close your eyes and listen. The ripple of the river, the soft bray of a donkey in the distance, the sigh of papyrus reeds swaying. The evening air smells faintly of cooling stone and fig bark. And you breathe. Not through clenched teeth, not in pain, just a simple, deep exhale. You lie back on your mat, hands resting on your chest. The night wraps around you like linen, gentle and ceremonial. Somewhere nearby, a temple bell sounds low and slow, its echo fading into the dark like a lullaby for the bones. Your body softens, your tongue grows heavy, your mouth is still now, peaceful, present, ready for silence. And if the gods peer down tonight, they'll see not a pharaoh or priest or servant, just a person with a clean mouth, a steady breath, and a little charm around the wrist, shaped like a scarab. Because you've earned this rest. Let your body melt into the mat. Let your breath slow to a whisper. Let your jaw unclench. There's nothing left to do. No more chewing, no more rinsing, no more sharp edges. Just sleep. And now, as the stars stretch wider across the ancient sky and the Nile flows like a lullaby beneath the moon, you feel everything soften. Your thoughts drift like feathers. To warm sun on your shoulders. To mint on your tongue. To the feel of a linen mat beneath your spine. The air is cooler now, sweeter, scented faintly with myrrh and rose. You take another slow inhale, and your chest rises like a wave, then falls again. Calm, quiet, sure. Nothing hurts. Nothing waits. You've done enough. And so you sink into the softness, into the cool, into the sweet, sleepy breath of night. Let your jaw go slack. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let your heartbeat match the hush. There is no more bread to chew, no more herbs to mash, no more worry. Only stillness, only warmth, only sleep.